do you think positing an enemy or some kind of quote unquote bad guy to direct anger at is necessary for a mass political mobilization? Is this like sort of a systemic critique of like it's the system, it's not the individuals? Is that politically viable, or like why do some of these mass movements maybe take on these sort of like individuals at figureheads? And what is it about a systematic critique that maybe can't or has struggles to evoke certain feelings that might otherwise be?
That's another brilliant question that kind of like has a whole theory that kind of like expresses a whole theory in a sense, which I think is quite interesting. So populism, as it's conceptualized as, like kind of like the observation about populism, which in some ways you could say is like a descriptive category, is that, there are, it posits the people against the elite. And you can see that, very clearly in left politics too, the 99%. So the people against an elite, but then there's also the dimension of the people against the elite and also against another people, right? Another people who threaten the position of the people that have conceptualized themselves as the political agent here. And that's more characteristic of right politics. So, and that's the anti-migrant discourse right now. And it's more than a discourse; it's a hatred. But anyhow, but is that necessary for mass politics? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I certainly hope not. But I think that, the question is, like, could we fight a system without fighting a people, right? Or fighting people? Could we fight a system? Is it possible to get people to understand that that's what they're doing? I don't know. I think that like there's always going to be antagonism, right? There's always going to be people on the other side of whatever it is. The system is people.
Yeah. No, I think of this, for me, an important figure for thinking about affect is Spinoza. I know he's not that important for you all, but and one of the things that Spinoza talks about is this sense that he says, you're to simplify it basically, he says, you're more likely to become angry or appreciative on some level when you think someone is acting freely than when you think they are determined by necessity, right? Like you don't get angry at a screaming baby on a bus. I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, because it's a baby. You can't help but scream, it's a baby. But if a grown man was screaming and throwing a tantrum, you'd probably get angry at him because he's a grown man. You'd think he's capable of not screaming, right? And so it does seem to me that one of the things about, one of the things that makes it's very difficult to create sort of indignation or anger at systems because so often those systems are faced by their appearance as just the way things are. Right? Capitalism is just the way things are. We can't do anything about it. We can't. It's bizarre that we have right now, a politics predicated on the supposed fantasy that immigrants are stealing our jobs. And that creates so much anger and hostility at the exact same moment that we're seeing the unleashing of AI that is probably literally going to fundamentally undermine so many jobs people used to do. It is going to steal jobs, right? But because it is perceived not as something someone is doing, but it's technology. Technology develops. This is the new technology. We can't do anything about it. That it's bizarre that the actual loss of jobs is generating less anger than the fantasy of the loss of jobs, because that fantasy is one in which there's someone to hate there. There's someone to hate there because they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to come here, or they didn't have to be sent here, or whatever the case may be. Because you can locate some kind of agency behind it, you can generate more anger and hostility. And I do think, and of course, there are people within the left who disagree about, some people really want to stress the structural, and some people want to say, the people who are ruining the planet, they have names and addresses, especially as our economy incredibly sort of the extreme inequality gets so extreme that we do seem to be dealing with a ruling class. It's like who can fit on Air Force One together and go to China. That's kind of where we are right now. But I mean, to me, it does seem to me that maybe you need figures to generate affect, people, faces to attach things to. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If you can do it, I mean, it'd be a very different way to feel to be angry about a structure, I guess, than to be angry about people.
One of the things we noticed as we were writing was that, well, we kind of rectified it a bit, but we were finding as we were doing the progressivism chapter that we weren't quoting or referring to as many actual like politicians or public figures. And we were thinking about how one of the things that happens on the left is this kind of taking down of people, basically the kind of like a kind of difficulty with leadership, a kind of, ambivalence, let's say, about the people who kind of emerge as leaders. And yeah, how difficult it is for a human to embody what people want on the left in general,
Yeah, I think Jason, your sort of evoking of Spinoza is really, really appropriate here, and something that I'm always appreciative of your work about, which is, it made me think too that almost for that same reason, people who are maybe more center or right will feel like certain things are inevitable and therefore they're not mad at them. But I think you almost by the same frame, you can also explain a little bit some like left nihilism, where you have such a structural analysis of the world where you're like, well, these people like, it's not like they can choose, like these people are compelled, right? They're like, I mean, this is like, butchering Marx's line, but about, like being capital personified, right? The capitalist is capital personified. And that also has this kind of, you get into these questions of like overdetermination, which have been dealt with for, a long time, right, around this stuff. But I think it's around that same crux where sometimes you can be like, well, yes, there are all these people here, but I don't actually think they're so compelled that it's hard to get mad at that any one individual. And then sometimes you're like, well, I guess the thing just keeps going on despite the misery. And so it's hard to, it's like that same crux that offers both of those answers. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, it feels just like at the end of the day, you will always confront those people that are compelled in that systematic way to either support you or not support you in your sort of path through the world. And that, whether you have the sort of structural critique or not, like we can't avoid confronting the people that have those things to do. So I think the anger kind of, it's going to go through people no matter what, I think. And the question is like, what do you do with it in a certain sense of like, how do you operationalize that in ways that are productive toward what you want to do? And of course, there are no easy answers.